Hi, my name's Janine Bandcroft. I'm the creator of Plant-Powered Radio. Things are changing in our world. Every day is a new day, and I'd just like to read you something rather than try to say all this off of the top of my head. So in March 2020, I started focusing on interviews with influential vegans from all around the world. And in the summer of 2020, I took the show, Plant Powered Radio, to CFUV, which is listener-powered radio station in Victoria, BC, and the traditional lands of the Songhees and Lekwungen peoples. So it's been an interesting journey through these constantly changing and challenging times. And there are just some big changes to Plant Powered Radio that I'd like to share with you today. Starting with a little story, a little backstory. So for decades, I provided programming to CFUV, previously through a radio show called The Winds of Change. It was focused on peace and environment and social justice and some animal liberation stories too. And I produced weekly event bulletins that we aired at Guerrilla Radio and announced everything from activist organizing to protest rallies. So I was a bit surprised when in October of this year, I received a stern reprimand from a staff person at CFUV. I had announced a peaceful rally in Toronto, specifically intended to oppose the vaccine mandates. In the announcement, I made it clear that the organizers welcomed all, whether you're jabbed or unjabbed, masked or unmasked, and they did not intend this to be an anti-vax or anti-mask rally. Everyone, all races, all political stripes, all genders were welcome to go and check out this gathering. In response to making this announcement, I received a harshly worded letter from a CFUV staff person advising me that they had heard concerns from listeners who, after hearing this event announcement, now believe CFUV to be an anti-vaccine broadcaster. Really? Okay. I was told that CFUV should be encouraging vaccination against COVID-19 and should not deviate from this message without providing a disclaimer. So once again, to be clear, in the event announcement, I tried to make it as clear as possible that the organizers welcomed all, jabbed or unjabbed, masked or unmasked. The rally was specifically meant to show opposition to the government mandates. Concern about the government mandates. Kind of like the rallies that have been happening in the streets throughout Europe and Scandinavia and parts of Asia and Australia the past several months. Hundreds of thousands of people are out in the streets. And you wouldn't know it if all you're tuned into is the corporate state media. So, I watched video of this rally that I had announced and got in trouble for announcing, and it was very reasonable. They actually opened it with some First Nations prayers and drumming from local folks in the Ontario region, and included all kinds of speakers and music, and there was a reasonable sized crowd gathering, and it was much like the hundreds of rallies I've attended these past decades as an activist, a place where people can go and listen and check it out and decide if they want to participate further or not or whatever. So anyways, CFUV's response was a surprise, and I was disappointed. A month or two previously, we had all us programmers had received notice that we were not to challenge the health authorities' handling of the pandemic. And okay, I cautiously agreed with that. It was all new. None of us knew much about what was going on. It was best to exercise caution rather than disseminate misinformation. But once the mandate agenda began to roll out and we started to have access, those of us willing to look for it, there's quite credible information and data challenging the dominant narrative, especially the mandates. And I began to realize that our new global situation is it so much about health and wellness as it is about social control? That's a question I started to ask. So for me personally, I really started to question it when our prime minister said he's not going to let me ride the bus. And I just thought, what's really going on here? So My nature is to start to investigate how and why. What's the intention here? What's the motivation behind this? And I started to select guests who could speak to these growing concerns, credible, reasonable people. But you know what I found myself doing is writing to them and saying, look, I want to put you on the radio, but this is our radio station's official position, and I don't want the station get into trouble. And would you mind just sort of working within these boundaries? And I was not happy with myself doing that. Luckily, my guests understood, and they complied, and we kept the conversation within boundaries. But that's not what I want to be doing in my lifetime. And I kind of knew at that time that I wouldn't be able to continue at CFUV if this was going to be an ongoing policy. So censorship is not something that happens in working democracies. It doesn't. It's something that happens within authoritarian regimes. Historically, you can look and you won't find censorship as a foundational pillar of any good democracy. So I knew that if CFUV didn't shift its attitude about trying to control our programming, which really this is the first time in 20 years at the station, I couldn't in good conscience stay there. So the response I received to my announcing this event, I sort of took that as a sign that from the universe that it's time to shift gears, because ultimately in my life, I want to remain true to myself. When I leave this planet, I want to do so with a clear conscience. Ultimately, I believe in a free press. I believe in the rights of journalists to interview guests about subjects that challenge the dominant narrative, and that's an essential pillar of a free and democratic society. I also believe in the old adage that silence is complicity. So rather than turning myself into just another stenographer for the ruling class and their agenda, I'm shifting gears. And so I lose my CFUV audience. I loved being a part of that radio station. But there's other options these days. I've been on YouTube for a while. I'll probably have to move off of YouTube because they're actively censoring independent journalists who question or challenge the dominant corporate and medical mantra. They're finding their way to places like Rumble and BitChute and Odyssey. I've settled on Odyssey. If you want to find me there, I'm at Plant Powered Radio, ODYSEE.com, Odyssey. And so I'm going to be searching for guests who have been victimized either by the new social control agenda, the mandates and the lockdowns and all of this, or people who have experienced side effects. There are many of these people, and their stories are heart-wrenching. So anyone who's had adverse reactions, and it varies from mild to can never work again, can barely get out of bed, so to death. I mean, there's many of those as well. So if you know anyone interested in sharing these stories, I think these people have a right to be heard. They're being silenced and ridiculed, and I would like to help those voices be heard. So please send them my way if you know anybody. I just want to thank you so much for tuning into Plant Powered Radio this past year, whether it's here in a video format or at CFUV or by listening to podcasts, which are available through platforms like Apple or Spotify. Hopefully that will continue. Another thing that happened in October, my government subsidies ended. I do have to say that I was pleased with the government's initial handling of this very new situation. They locked us down, but they provided some support, and I do appreciate that. That's all ended now, for me anyways, and so I'm starting to shave off the top of my retirement savings, which isn't a huge amount to begin with, and it's a little bit earlier in life than I had anticipated started doing that. So if you're in a position where you can support my work, even just a little bit, I do have an account at Patreon, Plant Powered Radio. You can search for it there, or there's a French site called LiberaPay, a platform that I've heard is a little more egalitarian than Patreon, or I have a PayPal account. And if you're interested in listening to other reliable voices who are working to expose some of the flaws in the dominant narrative, check out Russell Brand, Jimmy Dore, Allison Morrow, Max Blumenthal, Kim Iverson, or the Fred Hampton leftists. So there's many others, but these are currently some of my favorites. You can find them on YouTube, and also they're on Rockfin, most of them, I think. ROKFIN.com, I think it is, and that's another video platform that welcomes free expression. So I'm not saying any of us has all the answers, but I am saying that you have the right to all the information that we can possibly provide. So some of us are devoted journalists, that we feel drawn to doing this. I feel drawn to doing this. I like doing it. I like interviewing people, and I want to be able to do this work. And I want you to have the right to listen or not listen if you don't like it, right? You don't have to listen if you don't like what's going on. You don't have to agree, but you have the right to hear a diversity of voices, as many as you possibly can. And I would encourage you to check them out while you still can. And please make up your own mind about what you feel and believe is happening and how we're best to proceed and all the rest of that. Our situation, the science, it's constantly changing. Like nothing is standing still here. And there's a lot to keep up with. And in my opinion, we all need to invest just a little time and energy to keep up with what's going on. We'll do the research and provide the best voices we can. All you have to do is listen, and then maybe do some follow-up, check out some of the sources and see what you think, and decide for yourself. We're not a math, one size fits all, one brain. We know that this earth depends on diversity, evolution, and whatever you believe, that the evidence is in. Like, we can't survive in a monoculture. So please take this opportunity while you can to try to figure out what really is going on here. And so, okay, onward we go into this brave new world. Please stay safe and free, and remember to be kind to all kinds. Thanks for listening.